There is something you refuse to admit, something you keep even when you are alone. You hide it behind a smile, behind a screen, behind a phone, and if someone tried to look beyond, they would see what not even you have wanted to see. That part of you cannot bear, the part that scares you because it knows too much. They say we all have a shadow, but what few understand is that the feminine shadow does not only live in the unconscious. It lives in the silences, in deleted messages, in the thoughts you swore you would never have. I am Melkor Huamán, an expert in persuasion, manipulation, and dark psychology. Today, I will take you to a place where very few dare to look. If you choose to stay, you will not only understand what lives inside a woman's soul, but also what you hide from yourself. Keep watching, because what comes next could change your life. Carl Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That darkness in the feminine mind wears a different face. It is not about evil. It is about the power you denied yourself to survive, the power to manipulate, to control, to seduce, and to punish. You hid it because the world taught you that being good was the only way to be loved, but the repressed does not disappear. It only transforms, and sooner or later it seeks a way out. Inside every woman there is a part that watches in silence, that measures every gesture, that knows when to yield and when to destroy. I say this without judgment and with complete understanding. That part you deny is the very part that gives you strength when everyone has betrayed you. It is the voice that tells you not to trust anyone, that love has a price, that control is the only way to avoid suffering again. What you hide in your phone is not merely a secret. It is a mirror of what you do not dare to accept. I have studied human behavior for many years, from Edward Bernays' manipulation strategies to Robert Cialdini's principles of influence, from Paul Ekman's emotional observations to Philip Zimbardo's dark discoveries. They all agree on one thing: the most powerful psychological force lies not in what we say, but in what we keep silent. True manipulation does not shout. It whispers. It does not impose. It infiltrates. Dale Carnegie taught that the deepest human need is to feel important. When that need is not met, the mind begins to build masks. Machiavelli knew this. Whoever controls perceptions controls the world. Many people do not manipulate to harm, but to survive, to protect themselves from a pain they can no longer bear. Control becomes emotional armor, and the most dangerous part is that armor becomes addictive. There is a force acting silently inside you. Sometimes you feel it when someone ignores you and pride takes over, or when the fear of loss makes you say what you do not feel. That is the feminine shadow, a blend of sweetness and cruelty, tenderness and power. Jung called it the other half of the soul, the part that contains everything you repressed for fear of not being accepted. If you do not recognize it, it will make decisions for you. It will make you love who does not deserve you. It will make you doubt the one who loves you. It will make you punish the one who only tried to understand. We live in an era where manipulation dresses as love, where a message left unread can hurt more than 1,000 words, where a story on social media can spark jealousy, insecurity, or forbidden desires. Edward Bernays understood that whoever controls emotions controls the masses. Today, this is not about controlling others. It is about understanding the mechanism that operates inside your own mind. Because if you do not know your shadows, someone else will use them against you. Robert Hare and Kevin Dutton studied psychopaths and social geniuses. They discovered that the same traits that can destroy can also build power: selective empathy, emotional self-control, strategic coldness. These are not defects, they are tools, if you know how to use them. The problem is that most people deny them. By denying them, they become vulnerable to those who master them. The world does not belong to the kindest. It belongs to the most conscious. I am not talking about manipulating others. I am talking about understanding how the human mind is manipulated, starting with your own. Every time you tell yourself it's nothing while everything inside you burns, you are manipulating yourself. Every time you stay silent to avoid losing someone, you are giving up power. Every time you pretend indifference while you check the phone waiting for a message, you play a role in a script you did not write. Dark psychology is not about domination, it is about awakening. Sun Tzu said that he who knows himself can win 1,000 battles. but you cannot defeat an enemy you deny. Your shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Only when you look at it directly without fear will you discover that power is not in what you hide, but in what you dare to accept. What you are about to discover next could help you more than you imagine, because I will show you how to recognize that part of you that manipulates without meaning to, that loves from fear, and that is terrified of losing control. When you understand it, something inside you will change forever. Invisible power is not here to entertain you. It exists to open your eyes, to teach you to see what others prefer to ignore. In a world where everyone pretends to be good, the one who understands their darkness becomes free. Do not seek perfection, seek awareness. And if you dare to follow me, you will discover that darkness is not your enemy, it is your origin. When you look closely at the people who have hurt you the most, you start to see a pattern. They did not come into your life wearing a mask of evil. They came wearing a smile. They made you feel seen, understood, even special. That is how every manipulation begins, not with cruelty, but with connection. It is the same principle Edward Bernays used to sell ideas to the masses, give people the illusion of choice while shaping the options they believe they have. Every toxic person you've met, every emotional manipulator does the same thing, not because they are always conscious of it, but because it works. I've seen how charm can become a weapon, how empathy can become bait. A narcissist studies you like a map. They listen, but not to understand. They listen to gather ammunition. They discover what makes you feel loved, what makes you feel seen, and then they build a mirror made of your own desires. You look into it and see yourself, but it is only a reflection they control. That is the first law of psychological influence. Make the other person believe they are in control. Once they believe that, they'll never see the strings. Robert Cialdini described 6 principles of persuasion: reciprocity, commitment, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity. Toxic people intuitively master these. They give you just enough affection to make you feel indebted. Reciprocity. They make you defend them publicly, so you'll remain consistent. Commitment. They surround themselves with admirers to validate their image. Social proof. They project confidence so you mistake it for authority. They mimic your behavior to make you like them more, liking, and then they disappear to trigger your fear of loss. Scarcity. It is not magic, it is psychology in motion. Paul Ekman studied micro-expressions, those tiny flashes of truth the face reveals before the mind can lie. Toxic people learn to suppress those signals, or worse, to mimic them. They master empathy on the surface while remaining emotionally detached beneath. When you feel too much, they feel nothing. That imbalance gives them control. They feed off your emotional energy the way a strategist feeds off information in a war. Sun Tzu would have called it psychological warfare, to win without fighting, to conquer without resistance. But here's the truth most refuse to face. We all have the capacity to be that manipulator. Jung's shadow is not about good or evil. It's about wholeness. The traits you despise in others also live inside you. When you learn to identify manipulation in others, you also start to see the ways you've used it yourself, to protect, to survive, to feel safe. Awareness is not guilt. It is power. I've met people who radiate light but hide daggers behind their smiles. They say they hate liars, yet lie to avoid confrontation. They claim to love honesty but punish anyone who dares to speak the truth. That's the paradox of the shadow. The more you deny it, the more it controls you. To recognize manipulation, you must first admit your own. That's where liberation begins. There are patterns, small signals that reveal a toxic mind long before the damage is done. When someone idealizes you too quickly, when they make you feel like the only one who truly understands them, beware. That is not love, that is psychological positioning. They're setting you up for dependence. When they subtly make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, when they twist your words until you doubt your own memory, that is gaslighting. And when they hurt you and then blame your reaction, they are teaching you to silence your instincts. Dr. George K. Simon called this covert aggression. It is manipulation designed to control without appearing to control, and it works because it targets the very traits that make you human Empathy, compassion, the need to be understood. The manipulator does not overpower you by strength, they infiltrate your kindness. I remember the words of Philip Zimbardo, who said, "The line between good and evil is permeable, and almost anyone can be induced to cross it. We are not born with boundaries. We learn them after being broken. The most dangerous people are not those who shout, but those who whisper the right words when you are at your weakest. The real battlefield is not the world around you. It is the space between your thoughts. So how do you protect yourself without becoming what you fear? You begin by observing instead of reacting. Emotional control is not coldness, it is clarity. The manipulator thrives on your impulsive responses. The moment you react, they adapt. Silence becomes your shield. Distance becomes your clarity. When you no longer need validation, their power dissolves. Because every manipulative dynamic is built on one invisible contract, your willingness to seek approval. Daniel Kahneman explained that the mind runs on two systems, one fast, emotional, and instinctive, the other slow, deliberate, and rational. Toxic people target the first one. They want you to feel before you think. Every time you pause, breathe, and analyze, you shift from being a puppet to being the observer. You break the rhythm of emotional hypnosis. Let me give you an example. A manipulative partner apologizes after hurting you but never changes. They cry, promise, and tell you that you're overreacting. The words sound sincere, but the pattern repeats. That is not remorse. It is control disguised as vulnerability. Robert Hare would call this the mask of sanity, the ability to imitate emotion without feeling it. Once you see the pattern, you can no longer be fooled. The illusion breaks, but seeing through illusion takes courage. It means admitting how much of your pain came not from what they did, but from what you allowed while craving love. You start to understand what Aldous Huxley meant when he said that people do not want truth, they want reassurance. And reassurance is the manipulator's favorite tool. Listen carefully. Knowing these tactics is not about paranoia, it is about power. The goal is not to distrust everyone, but to trust yourself more deeply than ever before. Once you master your emotions, you stop being a target. You start to become the strategist in your own life. That is the essence of dark psychology used ethically, not to control, but to stay unshakable in a world built on invisible influence. What you are learning now is not just self-defense. It is awareness, the kind that rewires your perception forever. Because once you see the patterns, you can never unsee them. And once you stop chasing validation, manipulation loses its grip. Keep watching, because what you are about to discover next is the moment this knowledge turns into strength, the tools to apply it, to protect yourself, and to transform every relationship you have ever known. When knowledge becomes habit, it stops being an idea and becomes a weapon of survival. I do not offer tricks to manipulate others for selfish gain. I teach disciplined methods to protect your inner world, to reclaim the choice that manipulative dynamics try to steal. The line between defense and aggression is thin, and I will keep you on the right side of it, where strength lives quietly and decisions are free from panic. First, I train the body to lead the mind. When manipulation triggers you, the fastest route to losing control is to stay in the body's alarm state. I practice a simple somatic reset. Slow the breath, soften the shoulders, ground my feet. I name the sensation out loud. This is my fear. And I give it distance. Naming reduces intensity because it turns an instinct into information. It buys time. Time is the only thing a manipulator fears, because with time, the pattern becomes visible and the spell breaks. Second, I use delay as a principle. A manipulator wants immediate reaction. They create urgency so you act before you think. I reply after a set pause. I let a text sit for 30 minutes or 3 hours or until my body no longer tightens. That pause is not cowardice. It is strategy. During that window, I rehearse my response. I test the truth of the message against evidence, and I protect myself from impulsive concessions. You can create a mental script for this. Pause, breathe, label, option A, option B, choose. Repetition turns that pause into a reflex that neutralizes pressure. Third, I practice controlled disclosure. People who manipulate feed on information. I share only what is necessary. If someone asks about my past trauma or private plans, I answer with boundaries rather than confessions. I do not over-explain. Over-explaining is permission to be invaded. I cultivate the art of saying less without being cold. A short answer, a plain fact, a gentle redirect. It preserves dignity and reduces ammunition. Fourth, I develop narrative reframing. When someone twists reality, I refuse to accept their version as the only truth. I keep a private chronology, a short log of events written immediately after they happen. Facts, times, feelings, not to punish, but to anchor. When gaslighting starts, I consult my chronology. It serves as external memory and gives me a language to push back. I remember it differently. Here's what happened. Evidence shifts the dynamic from debate to accountability. Fifth, I rehearse boundary rituals. Boundaries are not walls, they are procedures. I decide in advance what I will tolerate and what I will not. I script phrases that are short and firm. I will not accept being spoken to that way. I need time alone. We will discuss this later. I practice them aloud until they feel natural. When your boundaries are practiced, not improvised, you stop negotiating with chaos. Sixth, I cultivate selective empathy. This is the ethical core of using dark psychology-informed skills. I see others' motives without losing compassion for myself. I observe why someone behaves the way they do, fear, shame, calculation. But I do not allow that observation to excuse my pain. Insight without surrender is mastery. Seventh, I use small experiments to test people. Rather than make grand declarations, I offer micro requests and observe reactions. Do they respect a small no? Do they accept a simple boundary? The answer to tiny tests is predictive of larger behavior. It is how I gather evidence without dramatic confrontations. These micro tests protect you from investing in illusions. Eighth, I train emotional endurance through daily rituals. I practice 10 minutes of reflective journaling each morning, choosing one impulse I will observe that day. I do a 3-minute evening audit. What felt true? What felt coerced? What I will change tomorrow. Small, consistent checks build a nervous system that resists hijacking. Habits become architecture. The brain learns a different baseline, and predators find less clutter to exploit. Ninth, I use language as containment. I avoid absolutes in charged conversations. I replace always and never with specific descriptions. When this happened, I felt. This technique reduces escalation and brings the conversation into the realm of facts and feelings instead of moral verdicts. It also removes the manipulator's safety of argument by exaggeration. 10th, I practice strategic withdrawal. Sometimes the most powerful move is to leave the scene when it is clear the other person is unwilling to change. Withdrawal is not a threat. It is a boundary enforced by action. It protects your resources and sends a clear message. Respect is not optional. Let me give you a case I witnessed. A woman came to me exhausted from a partner who oscillated between generosity and coldness. He apologized, promised, then repeated the pattern. She had internalized blame and rationalized inconsistencies. We started with a 30-minute pause rule and a private chronology. She practiced brief, firm boundaries and reduced disclosure. Within weeks, the dynamic shifted, not because he changed instantly, but because she changed her responses. He stopped using apology as a reset because she no longer accepted it as sufficient. She reclaimed herself, and the relationship either improved or ended. Both outcomes better than her previous slow erosion. Another example, a manager who used flattery to undermine colleagues and pit teams against each other. A team member used micro-tests, small asks that should be met if the manager were sincere. They documented responses, used measured language in meetings, and practiced selective empathy when offering feedback. The manager's manipulative pattern collapsed under consistent structural resistance. That team regained cohesion. At the midpoint of what I teach, I always ask people to commit publicly to one habit because commitment fuels consistency. If you find value in this, subscribe to Invisible Power and activate the bell. You will join a community that values clarity over drama, strength over sympathy, and mastery over submission. This channel is a tool. use it. Now, how do you apply these principles every day? Start with a simple morning checklist. Breathwork for 2 minutes, a 3-line intention. Today I will pause before reacting. Today I will practice one boundary. And a short rehearsal of phrases you need. Keep a pocket journal or a notes app for immediate chronology entries. Set a phone rule. No impulsive replies within 30 minutes. Practice saying, "I need time" out loud until it feels like a muscle. For deeper work, I recommend a controlled exposure method. Identify a recurring trigger, the blank message, the sarcastic comment, the minimization of your feelings. Imagine the worst-case version of that trigger for 30 seconds, then script the response you will enact. This pre-mortem reduces fear because you have already mapped the outcome. It trains courage. Another practical tool is the anchor phrase. Choose a short anchor that recenters you when emotional hijacking begins. Mine is observe, not obey. Repeat it internally, feel the breath anchor, and proceed. Anchors condition the nervous system to shift from reactivity to observation. Finally, use your social architecture. Keep a circle of trusted people who know your patterns and can offer reflection without judgment. Accountability partners are not tattletales, they are mirrors. They will help you see when your shadow is steering decisions, and they will celebrate when you choose differently. Ethically applied, these skills change your life because they change who you are in relation to others. You will not become cold or manipulative. You will become sovereign. You will no longer hand your narrative to people whose motives you do not trust. You will learn to speak the truth without fear of retribution because your safety does not depend on permission. What you cultivate now will compound. Habits of pause, boundaries, evidence, and rehearsal become the scaffolding of a life where influence no longer erodes you. The tools of dark psychology, when used with integrity, become instruments of liberation. Awareness is not a single revelation. It is a discipline that reshapes how you move through every conversation. I've seen people believe that once they learn dark psychology, they'll be safe forever. They forget that the mind adapts, that manipulation evolves with subtlety. The moment you stop observing, the shadow reclaims the steering wheel. Mastery is maintenance. In the quiet moments after confrontation, when no one is watching, that's where the real battle takes place. You review the dialogue, you hear the tone again, you question whether you were too harsh or too soft. That self-interrogation is the birthplace of growth if you use it correctly. Do not aim to erase guilt. Aim to understand it. Guilt is data. It shows you where your compassion met your boundaries and asked for reconciliation. The greatest paradox I've learned is that self-protection and empathy are not enemies. They are siblings. When balanced, they create moral gravity. You can look at someone's deception without hatred. You can enforce a boundary without cruelty. That equilibrium is what Jung described as individuation, becoming a complete self, no longer fragmented between light and dark. I challenge you to spend one day listening differently. Observe every interaction as an exchange of power rather than words. Notice who leads by calm, who leads by fear, who trades emotion for compliance. Then ask, what energy do I bring into the room? That single question begins the lifelong dialogue between your conscious self and your shadow. If you apply everything you've learned here, the pause, the documentation, the deliberate language, the empathy with edges, you will notice the world shifting. Manipulators lose interest. Chaos becomes transparent. You won't need to fight, you'll simply stop being edible. That is quiet dominance, power without noise. Remember, awareness does not make you invincible. It makes you responsible. Once you see, you can no longer pretend. You must choose whether to use insight for creation or control. The difference defines your legacy. As Robert Greene wrote, power is neutral. It becomes good or evil according to who wields it and why. So I leave you with a question that will follow you long after this video ends. When no one is watching and control is within your reach, will you use it to free or to bind? Think about that. Because in your answer lies not just your psychology, but your humanity. You've been listening to Invisible Power. My name is Melkor Huamán, and what I share here is not designed to make you feared. It is designed to make you free.